Mr. Drazen and Ms. Hendren, whenever you are ready.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Shelley Hendren. I serve as the administrator for the Rehabilitation Division of DETR. That's the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. And I'm here to present SB 61, which proposes changes to NRS 426, the statutes related to the Blind Business Enterprise of Nevada, or BEN program. The BEN program is part of the Rehabilitation Division, for which I have oversight. And with me today is Deputy Administrator Drazen Ellis, who was previously the chief of the BEN program, and current chief, Chris Mazza, and they are here as subject matter experts should we need to call on their expertise. So briefly, the BEN program provides entrepreneurial opportunities for individuals who are blind to own and operate their own vending facilities in public buildings and properties. These vending facilities may include vending machines, cafes, cafeterias, cart services, micro markets, and even gift shops and sundry shops. This program was established with the passage of the Randolph-Shepard Act in 1936, which gave priority of right to blind individuals in federal buildings and properties to own and operate these vending facilities. So states across the nation then created state statutes, often called the mini Randolph-Shepard Act, to mirror federal law within state law. And in fact, Nevada statutes have existed for more than 60 years. The state statutes provide the priority of right for blind licensees in state, local, and municipal buildings and properties. So the BEN program is an extension of our vocational rehabilitation program. When there is a client of the Bureau of Services to Persons who are blind or visually impaired who desires to be an entrepreneur, who demonstrates that aptitude, he or she may be referred to the BEN program. And if accepted into the BEN program, staff provide intensive training to that individual, such as budgeting, payroll, operations, inventory control, management practices, merchandising, and safety. And then after on-the-job training, these candidates are considered for licensure. Licensees may then bid on sites to own and operate. These programs exist because blind individuals are employed at a rate of 52.3%. And that's as compared to 78.2% for those without a disability. Blind individuals are in the poverty rate at nearly 30%. So in Nevada, our blind licensees own and operate over 400 vending machines and 29 sites statewide. During typical times, they employ over 100 Nevadans. Currently, due to the pandemic, we are sadly about half that number. Some sites you may recognize include the snack bars at many DMV locations, the Hoover Dam Cafe and the Hoover Dam Mercantile, and the Caucus Deli at the Legislative Building here in Carson City. So with the proposed changes within SB 61, we hope to accomplish a few things. Provide clarity of the law's intent, define terms, and then use them consistently throughout the statute. To align state law more closely with the federal Randolph-Shepard Act and federal regulations. And then lastly, to add a new section on training. And Madam Chair, before I dig into the meat of this, I wanted to ask you, would you like me to take questions after each section or at the end?
We could go ahead and take questions at the end. Let's go ahead and finish your presentation.
All right. Thank you so much. Shelley Hendren for the record. All right, I'd like to go through SB 61 by section. However, I'm not going to address every section. Many simply have conforming language or are non-substantive. I want to be mindful of your time and present only the most impactful changes that we're proposing in the bill. And also, I'd like to point out that we've already submitted a conceptual amendment to SB 61, and I'll call your attention to the proposed amended language as we proceed. All right, so Section 2 of the bill is the new section on training. Training of our blind licensees, including what's called upward mobility training, is required in federal law. And we wanted to codify this in state law due to its importance and because we have an obligation to our licensees and to our public partners. And to this point, Section 11 in NRS 426.670, subsection 1B, states that the Bureau is obligated to, quote, select, train, license, and assign qualified persons who are blind to operate vending facilities, unquote. Section 3 next appears new as our dispute resolution process has been rewritten. So the repealed section, of course, is in the back of the bill draft request. The prior process placed the deeder director as the decision maker in disputes and even potentially involved the governor. So this new section provides for a more formal, uniform, and objective means to solve disputes between the Bureau and any public partner or entity through the hearings division. And prior to submitting this bill draft request, I did speak with the senior appeals officer at the hearings division, and we do have their support for this addition to our statutes. I'd like to move then to section 6, which are definitions. And as you can see, we've added several new definitions. We think it's especially important to clarify these terms and thus clarify the intent of the program. And I want to specifically point out the definitions in subsection 4, 5, and 6. Subsection 4 is the definition for public building or property. We wanted to clarify the intent of the priority of right for our blind licensees. And to do so, we included public entity in our definition. However, in adding a new term, we wanted to be sure it was defined. So we first looked to see if it was defined in NRS 426, which of course it is not. Then we looked to other statutes related to NRS or NAC 426, and we did not find it there. However, finally, we looked for the definition throughout Nevada revised statutes, and we found several examples. What we did is model our definition after the definition for public entity, public employer, which is in NRS 286.070. In subsection 4, definition 4, it also includes some exceptions. And these are the same that have existed in the NRS currently, except public elementary and secondary schools are an exception, the Nevada System of Higher Education, the Nevada State Park System, and the Department of Corrections. And here's the first of our conceptual amendments. We've proposed adding another exception to the end of this list. We are seeing new public and private partnerships, especially in and around Las Vegas, and based upon some concerns that were raised with us by a public entity, we're proposing an exception for any building or property that is leased to private entities for live entertainment purposes as defined in NRS 368A.090. So that's proposed language. That definition of live entertainment is expansive. We think that's a benefit, as all the examples listed in 368A.090 help to illustrate the meaning and intent of live entertainment. Definition 6 or subsection 6 defines vending facility. And this new definition is taken directly from federal regulations, 34 CFR 395.1X. And there were concerns that we were expanding the definition, which is not the case. The previous definition did include vending machines, cafeterias, and snack bars, for example, but it was written in such a way that we thought was too difficult to understand. And to clarify, we are using the federal definition. We also changed the term from stand to facility, as the term stand has often been misunderstood to mean vending machines only. And indeed, the federal definition uses the term facility, vending facility. Moving on to section 7, this includes new language to further explain the meaning of our licensee's priority of right. So first, their priority is defined in the section we just went through, in definition section 6. Then section 7, subsection 1A, adds language to explain the right of first refusal. Then finally, the process to survey a site and the process to accept or waive it is explained in section 11, with additional language about waivers in section 7, subsection 2. So I have a sample waiver that I'd be happy to share if the committee's interested to see that. You can certainly let us know. And a little bit about waivers. All our waivers indicate the date, the type of vending facility being waived, and the address of the public building or property being waived. Waivers contain conditional language when appropriate. It's typical for a waiver to include that it's good until the public entity decides to alter the intended use of the space or the scope of the concessions. And Section 7 requires that the waiver be in writing and signed by me in the capacity of rehabilitation administrator or my designee. So within the authority and the law, we feel the waiver is a legally enforceable document. A concern was raised about Section 7, subsection 1A, which states that if a public entity has an agreement in place for which the Bureau notifies it that it intends to exercise its priority right, that agreement is null. However, I want to say on the record, it's not our intention to retroactively break all contracts between public entities and their vendors. We will likely provide a conceptual amendment requesting this section be effective upon passage and not retroactively. SB 61 proposes changes to the notice period in Section 8 from 30 days to 90 days. We originally proposed this due to the length of time it takes within state processes to enter into a contract with the public entity, go through the state's purchasing process to purchase equipment for the site, select our selection process for a blind licensee, and for that licensee to hire employees and be ready to open. However, there was a concern raised that 90 days is just too early for public entities to provide such notice. So as a compromise, we are proposing a 60-day notice in our conceptual amendment. And this is the same notice period as required in the federal regulations. So I'd like to jump to Section 11, which is NRS 426.670. And this is a heavy section of the law. It contains details on our surveying, establishing vending facilities, the Bureau's ability to create regulations, and then costs that shall or shall not be paid by blind licensees. So I have a couple points to make in Section 11. Subsection 1A details our survey process. And the Bureau would conduct a survey of a potential site to determine if it might be a viable site for a blind licensee. As an example, if the public entity wanted a cafeteria and a site survey indicated that that public entity had 40 employees in the building and the building was not open to the public, a full cafeteria likely would be waived by the Bureau, assuming that there would not be enough foot traffic for it to be profitable. However, if the Bureau surveys the site and determines it is a viable vending facility, then subsection 2 details the necessity for cooperation from that public entity to establish the vending facility. Although this subsection 2 is new language, it previously existed in the line through subsection 1B. The new subsection 2 adds more detail. And we had a concern raised by the way it was written that the Bureau would potentially insist on a vending facility whether the partner wanted it or not. And of course, that's not our intent. Indeed, we enter into contracts with our partners, which would suggest to me negotiation and ultimately agreement. However, we did submit a conceptual amendment to allay these fears and proposed adding that the public entities shall cooperate with the Bureau to, quote, discuss options and upon agreement, end quote, ensure the establishment of one or more vending facilities. We do need the ability to work with that partner entity and be able to discuss with them what the Bureau and its entrepreneurs have to offer. And we, of course, would require agreement in order to install a vending facility. So also in Section 11, SB 61 adds more detail to our ability to create regulations, and that's in subsection 4. The added language is taken directly from the requirements within federal regulations. And then subsection 5 distinguishes costs that shall be paid by licensees or those that shall not. These are taken from the Randolph-Shepard Act, which put constraints on what may be paid out of the licensee's set-aside fund. I should add that the Bureau in Nevada is totally self-funded by these entrepreneurs from their set-aside payments. Each pays a proportionate amount from their net proceeds into a set-aside fund, and payments out of that fund are strictly limited. This has actually been tested in Nevada courts on 2 occasions related to paying rent. in 1998 and in 2011, and we could share those citations with you if interested, both of which upheld the Bureau's position that licensees are prohibited from paying rent. This further enforces our position with SB 61 that courts in Nevada consider our alignment with the Randolph-Shepard Act and federal regulations. So still in section 11, subsection 6, we added the ability to pay incentives in the rare instance that it might be appropriate. This is the only payment outside of increased utility costs where we have any flexibility. The term has been borrowed from the state of Tennessee's mini Randolph-Shepard Act, where it is in use in their agreements to run commissaries and county jails. However, as stated in subsection 6, the establishment of the vending facility, quote, must not, under any circumstances, be contingent upon the payment of an incentive, end quote. So I'm almost done here. Thank you for hanging with me. Section 12 adds a description of management services in subsection 3, which are allowable to be paid out of the set-aside or enterprise account. This is the federal description. And the change in subsection 5B regarding the portion each licensee would receive if the program was liquidated was determined and agreed to by the Nevada Committee of Vendors Who Are Blind. Section 13 has added language that ensures the continuity of services in a vending facility should the blind licensee have a period of disability or permanent disability. It outlines what would occur, including that the Bureau would run the site until the licensee was able to return up to 6 months. Section 14 allows the Bureau to establish vending facilities in private buildings, if appropriate, and with the consent of the private party. And then lastly, I'd like to call your attention to section 19. So this is NRS 426.715. This is the penalty section of the law. And the only changes herein are conforming language. However, a concern was raised that according to this section, public employees could be guilty of a misdemeanor for ordering a sandwich from a sandwich shop or a pizza from a pizzeria, and that even the delivery drivers of that sandwich or that pizza could be guilty of a misdemeanor. So this is not our intent. Therefore, we did submit a conceptual amendment here as well to eliminate the language, or we're proposing, orders for or deliveries in this section. So instead it would read, any person who sells or solicits in or on a public building or property any commodity which a licensee is authorized by the Bureau to sell is guilty of a misdemeanor. Then there follows the list of exceptions. So this concludes my introduction of SB 61, and thank you for your time. And I and my team would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I'll open it up to the members of the committee. Questions from any members of the committee? Senator Harris.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I had a question about limiting it to 2 vending facilities as training sites. Can you explain a little bit about why it's limited to 2? And are you worried at all that might affect who's able to participate?
Yes, Madam Chair, through you to the Senator. Thank you so much for that question. Shelley Hendren for the record. We are limiting it to 2 because we don't want to have the Bureau take up too many sites that could be awarded to blind licensees. But on the same hand, we do see the benefit of having training sites and people being able to get on the job, very specific training to what they will be doing. We do offer that currently, and some of our licensees host other trainees. But the idea of a training site is much more controlled, and we think that they can get quality experiences there. But the limit of 2 is because if we have viable sites, we want our licensees to own and operate them and reap the benefits.
Madam Chair, I have one more question, if I may. Thank you so much. My next question is about Section 14. I understand that there is a fee that will be paid it looks like the licensees will be paying now. Who paid the fees before?
I'm sorry, can you give me the reference of what fee you're talking about? Or are you talking about set aside?
I'm looking at, well, it's not a fee. It looks like it's an incentive
Oh,
being
yes.
paid by the licensee.
Yes. Yes, thank you for that question, Madam Chair, through you to the Senator. Shelley Hendren for the record. So we wanted the ability to have some flexibility where appropriate to pay incentives. But because the set aside fund is so strictly limited on what can be paid out, incentive is the only means to do so. And that's why we modeled this after what's in state law in Tennessee. So they're actually doing this. Typical fees can't be charged, rent and some of those other things. But we added this just to give ourselves that wiggle room, that flexibility with our partners if it's appropriate. But as it says, this is optional, it's negotiable, and both parties have to agree. And us opening a vending facility cannot be contingent upon paying that.
Thank you.
Thank you.